Chapter 1144. You want to go to Southern Chu? Su Jirui asked with a frown. Mo Xiaobao sighed. If I don't go now, I won't have a chance in the future. Now he still had his eldest uncle and fourth uncle to help him, but Mo Xiaobao could tell that his eldest uncle wouldn't stay for long. If he didn't play when his eldest uncle was still around, he could only hold the booklet and cry when his eldest uncle ran away. But he should be able to delay it until Su Jirui and Ling Junhan could help him, right? Mo Xiaobao loved to discuss things with others, but the things he was willing to discuss with others were things he had already decided on. Therefore, the other three people only objected to his question for a while before they unanimously agreed. Actually, they also wanted to go out and play. The next morning, before dawn, the four figures slipped out of the Prince Ding mansion and prepared to head towards the city gate. When the city gate opened, they immediately slipped out of the city. Big brother, brother Xiaobao, cheerful shouts came from the dark street. Mo Xiaobao froze at first, then quickly rushed to the corner of the street and picked up the brat who was waving at him with a smug face. Why are you here at this time? Mo Xiaobao gritted his teeth as he stared at the innocent and cute Mo Yufeng. At this time, shouldn't this brat be sleeping soundly on the bed? Mo Xiaobao grabbed Mo Yufeng's collar and asked without the slightest guilt of abandoning his younger brother to play alone. Mo Yufeng didn't mind being lifted in the air by his older brother and danced excitedly. Lin Er heard that brother Junhan wanted to sneak out to play without Lin. Lin Er wants to go too. Lin Er will wait here for brother to go together. The three youths all glared at Ling Junhan. You can't do anything right. Ling Junhan rubbed her nose helplessly. Who knew that this brat would hear it so coincidentally? Ling Junhan took the little bun from Mo Xiaobao and coaxed with a smile. Lin Er, be good. We're not going out to play. We're going out to do something. Lin Er will help brother. Mo Yufeng raised his little hand and said enthusiastically. You're only 6 years old, half a fart. It's very tiring to eat and sleep outdoors every day. There are tigers that want to eat people. Ling Junhan threatened. Mo Yufeng looked at him with bright eyes. Tigers. Kill the tiger. Su Jirui stepped forward and grabbed Mo Yufeng. He stared at him and said, You're not allowed to go. You can't go? Mo Yufeng blinked his eyes and looked at his cousin anxiously. Yes. Wah. Mo Yufeng's small mouth twitched and he was about to burst into tears. Everyone hurriedly stepped forward and covered his little mouth tightly. This little ancestor was so full of energy that when he cried he could wake up half the people on the street. The child lay in Su Jirui's arms and looked at his brother pitifully. I won't let you go. Cry. Xiaobao rolled his eyes and took back his words. Who said that this brat was stupid, he would kick him to death. Thus, the group of four youths who had been tricked by a child under the age of 7 brought a white and tender little bun out of the city gate. When dawn broke and young Master Qingchen came to the Prince Ding mansion to discuss government affairs, he found that there was not a single master in the mansion. In the study there was a letter on the table where he usually sat. Emperor Chu's wedding he would definitely return in half a year. Su Qingyan, who was standing behind young Master Qingchen, could not help but twitch his mouth. Sending a wedding gift for half a year, this little prince was really relieved. Xiaobao even took Lin Er away? Should we go and chase him back? Fourth brother was a half-grown child, so it was not very reassuring to bring a real child out. Su Qingchen shook his head and put down the letter. He slowly began to deal with government affairs. No need. Since he brought him out, he must know what to do. Moreover, even if Xiaobao ran away from home, how could he really leave the children alone? There must be a lot of shadow guards and even Qilin secretly following him. There were also the people from the Prince Ding mansion who took care of them, so there was no need to worry about anything happening. Su Qingyan nodded. In his heart he secretly criticized Xiaobao for being unloyal. He did not even inform him when there was something fun. Just as he was thinking, he saw Su Qingchen suddenly turn around and stare at him. Su Qingyan jumped in fright, thinking that his big brother had seen through his thoughts. Big brother? Su Qingchen said indifferently, there is something that needs to be dealt with quickly. What is it? Su Qingyan was confused. Su Qingchen said indifferently, it's about the consort selection banquet. The old men in Glass City who were bored out of their minds placed great importance on this matter, even more so than when they were waiting for Mo Shuyao to ascend the throne. It was said that even the location and time had been set. If they knew that Xiaobao had run away after tricking them, wouldn't they vomit blood in anger? That What does it have to do with us? Su Qingyan said in a trembling voice. He did not want to argue with those old men at all. Young Master Qingchen was silent for a moment before nodding. That's right. It has nothing to do with us. If anyone asks, just tell them to wait for the prince to return before making a decision. Su Qingyan nodded and said with a smile, maybe Xiaobao will bring back a consort when he returns. If that was the case, who knew what those old men's expressions would be like? On the official road several dozen li away from Glass City, fourth brother was riding a horse slowly on the official road. There was a little doll that looked like it was carved from jade on the back of one of the horses. I keep feeling that we have forgotten something. Leng Junhan frowned and said with a bit of vexation. Mo Xiaobao looked at him and said, what is it? Leng Junhan glanced at him and said, the consort selection banquet. He seemed to remember that he had heard someone say that the consort selection banquet was scheduled for the beginning of next month. There were still more than 10 days left. When Mo Xiaobao wasn't here, what would they choose? Mo Xiaobao waved his hand unconcernedly and said, small matter. Did you give orders before you left? Why would I give orders? Mo Xiaobao did not understand. That consort selection banquet wasn't something that I told them to do. If they want to do it, then do it. As for how they would choose and who would marry the chosen one, it was not something that he could control. He had just casually expressed his beautiful wish to be with someone close to him for the rest of his life. Who knew that these people would be so bored that they would imagine so many things? They might delay the time and wait for you to go back. He could not underestimate these people's obsession with Princess Ding's position. It would not be difficult to wait for Mo Xiaobao to go back and do this. Mo Xiaobao would have to go back eventually. Mo Xiaobao rubbed his little brother's head and said with a smile, that's even better. I remember that there are still many unmarried soldiers in the Mahist army. I was planning to hold half a blind date banquet to help the soldiers settle their marriage. Chapter 1145. Jiangnan Nanjing City. The rich and vast Dechu state that once dominated a region, and the Dechu state that was once known as one of the two hegemons of the world with Xiling, was now just like Xiling. It could be said that the Western Tomb and the Great Chu were fated to meet. Originally they came from the same source, and at almost the same time they established their countries and became strong. Then they became enemies with each other, but at almost the same time, they declined because of the same people and reasons. After the war a few years ago, more than half of Xiling and Dechu state's territory belonged to the Prince Ding mansion. Although the master of the Prince Ding mansion was unwilling to ascend the throne, and even his master disappeared in the end, the power of the Prince Ding mansion still continued to grow. But it was still unable to stop Ding Wangfu's power from growing stronger day by day. The people under his command lived and worked in peace and contentment. It was as though the whole world had submitted to him. Although the war had only happened a few years ago, Jiangnan had not been affected by the war. The little emperor, who had seized power with great difficulty these few years, had also worked hard. Once they entered Nanjing City, it was difficult to see the prosperity and liveliness of Nanjing City. Although it could not be compared to Glass City, which had guests from all over the world, it had more of the charm of a 1,000-year-old ancient city that Glass City did not have. Mo Xiaobao and the others attracted the attention of passers-by as soon as they entered the city. 4 handsome youths with extraordinary auras walking side by side was already very eye-catching. Needless to say, the most outstanding of the youths, who was wearing a black brocade, was holding a 5 or 6-year-old child wearing a white brocade. He saw the little baby lying in the young man's arms, a pair of big round eyes looking around curiously. If not for the fact that these youths did not look like ordinary people, many aunties who were attracted by the child would have gone up to pinch it. The group of 4 and 1 small entered the city, and swaggered towards the best inn in Nanjing City. After settling down in the inn, Mo Xiaobao played with his little brother's restless paws while looking at the others. We seem to have come early. Is there anything fun to play with? Didn't he come early? Mo Suiyun's wedding was set to be on the 19th of this month, and today was only the 8th. There were still more than 10 days to go. These 10 days were enough for Mo Xiaobao to turn the entire Nanjing upside down. Qin Lai raised his eyes to look at Mo Xiaobao and then sat to the side to wipe his sword. He was a bodyguard, so of course he would do whatever his master told him to do. Therefore it was not up to him to use his brain. Furthermore, he didn't need to be responsible for any bad consequences. Su Jirui thought about it seriously and said, I'm going to visit some great scholars in Jiangnan. Therefore he would not go with Xiaobao. Femo Xiaobao did something that angered the heavens and people in Jiangnan. It was none of his business. Only Ling Junhan was in high spirits. She blinked and said, "Aren't we going to play with the little emperor?" Xiaobao pursed his lips. The little emperor must be very busy right now. Where would he have the time to play with us? As guests, we shouldn't trouble the host. Ling Junhan immediately wilted. What else is there to play with in Jiangnan other than the little emperor? Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes and smiled slyly at Ling Junhan, saying, "Well, what idea do you have?" Ling Junhan's eyes lit up. Su Jirui and Qin Lai touched their noses and moved aside. For so many years, they had never understood whether Ling Junhan was really stupid or pretending to be stupid. He was always tricked by Mo Xiaobao with all kinds of ridiculous and childish reasons to do all kinds of outrageous things, and then he would look innocent and wronged afterwards. He was stupid because no matter how ridiculous Mo Xiaobao's reasons were, he would run over in the end. He was pretending to be stupid because every time he did something bad, at least half of the consequences were borne by Mo Xiaobao himself. Regarding this, young Master Lung's father once complained to Prince Ding that his son was bullied into being stupid by the little heir. Young Master Qingchen, who was the wisest in the world, said that great wisdom appeared to be stupidity. Mo Xiaobao glanced at Qin Lai and Su Jirui, who were unwilling to be with him, and whispered a few words in Ling Junhan's ear. Ling Junhan's handsome eyes suddenly widened. He looked at Mo Xiaobao hesitantly and said, Isn't it a little too wicked?" Qin Lai and Su Jirui couldn't help but pricked up their ears. Even little dummy Ling, who had always been wicked, felt that it was wicked. How wicked was it? Was Mo Xiaobao planning to kill all the people in Nanjing City? Mo Xiaobao disagreed. "How is this wicked? We are helping him. No, you can do this kind of thing yourself." This time Ling Junhan refused firmly. "I want to keep my chastity for Sister Exa." Mo Xiaobao rolled his eyes and glanced at Ling Junhan with disdain. "Still thinking about my Exa? You really don't want to go? Forget it if you don't want to go. When Exener gets married in the future, I will inform you to attend the wedding banquet." Mo Xiaobao said leisurely. "You bully." Young Master Lung glared at Mo Xiaobao. When he thought of his beautiful, smart, fair and tender sister Exeter being snatched away by another stinky man, his heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. In order to get the beauty in the future, he had to sell himself to Mo Xiaobao. "I'll go, good boy," Mo Xiaobao said with a smile as he hugged his younger brother. Mo Xiaobao, Ling Junhan is only 14 years old. Is it really okay to force him to go to a brothel? Of course, Mo Xiaobao didn't want Ling Junhan to go to a brothel. After sending Su Jirui off with a smile, Mo Xiaobao ignored Ling Junhan, who was in a dilemma. He hugged his cute little brother and went out with Qin Lai. Walking on the street, Qin Lai couldn't help but ask, "What did you ask Ling Junhan to do?" Mo Xiaobao smiled proudly. "Do you want to know?" "I won't tell you." Mo Yufeng raised his hand happily and said, "Brother Qin Lai, I know. Big brother asked Brother Junhan to seduce." Boo. Mo Yufeng's little mouth was covered by Mo Xiaobao's hand and he cried angrily. The corner of Qin Lai's mouth couldn't help but twitch. Although the little child didn't have time to finish, he could basically guess it. With Mo Xiaobao's bad nature, he definitely wouldn't let Ling Junhan seduce an ordinary person. After thinking for a while, Qin Lai asked, "Don't tell me you're planning to let Ling Junhan seduce the princess of Southern Chu?" Mo Suiyan wanted to marry his royal sister to Mo Xiaobao and be Mo Xiaobao's brother-in-law for a long time. Although he wasn't sure where this royal sister came from, she at least had the title of princess. If Ling Junhan seduced her, it wouldn't just be Mo Suiyan and Southern Chu that would lose face. Little Mo Yufeng shook his head repeatedly and danced in Mo Xiaobao's arms. Mo Xiaobao calmly suppressed his little brother's rebellious behavior. Although Mo Yufeng was already 6 years old and his little arms and legs weren't light, he was still as powerless in Mo Xiaobao's hands as when he was 1 or 2 years old. How could it be? How could I do such a tasteless thing? I clearly asked him to seduce the eldest daughter of the Qian family. Chapter 1146. It was tasteless to seduce other people's princess, but was it tasteless to seduce other people's empress? Qin Lai was seriously considering whether to send more guards to Nanjing, in case Mo Xiaobao was accidentally torn apart by the angry Mo Suiyan. Do you think Ling Junhan can do it? A handsome 14-year-old boy couldn't compete with a 17 or 18-year-old emperor who already had power in his hands. Don't worry, I've sent someone to check. This Miss Qian is gentle and kind by nature, and she prefers handsome young men who are also gentle and elegant. Mo Xiaobao waved his hand to show that he was fully prepared. Qin Lai thought for a while and was still a little worried. Send more people to protect Ling Junhan. They do as you see fit. Mo Xiaobao walked forward with his younger brother in his arms, revealing a sly smile like a fox. Student Qin Lai, who didn't even say a word of advice from beginning to end, do you think you are a righteous and kind person? That's why birds of a feather flock together. Within a radius of 10 miles around Mo Xiaobao Prince, even the heart of a mosquito was black. Inside the palace, Mo Suiyun was sitting in the imperial study reviewing memorials. The surrounding palace maids and eunuchs were standing quietly, not daring to disturb the emperor. Although Mo Suiyun was only 18 years old, after these years of training, especially after taking back the power that belonged to him from the hands of the Empress Dowager and the ministers in the court, he had more experience and calmness than his age. If it weren't for the two previous emperors who went against the flow and left him with such a mess, Mo Suiyun might have become the real master of the Dechu state's revival. But now, no matter how hard he tried, he could only let the Dechu state stay in Jiangnan. And this was still based on the Prince Ding mansion's unwillingness to start a war. Otherwise, no matter how hard Mo Suiyun tried, he couldn't be sure whether the current Southern Chu army could resist the Mahist army's iron cavalry. Your Majesty. A man who looked like a guard came in and bowed. Ping Sheng, say it, Mo Suiyun said without raising his head. Are the people from the Prince Ding mansion or the people from the West Hill? This imperial bodyguard had received his orders to be in charge of tracking the movements of the envoys from various countries for this grand wedding. Although there were still a dozen or so days before the wedding, it wasn't strange for people to arrive early. What they needed to do was to grasp the movements of these people and prevent them from doing anything they shouldn't do within Southern Chu's borders. Prince Ding is here. The pen in Mo Suiyun's hand paused for a moment before he realized that the Prince Ding mentioned by the guard was not the famous Prince Ding Mo Xiuyao, but the little Prince Mo Yuchen who had just taken office. He snuck in secretly. After this year, Mo Suiyun already had some understanding of Mo Xiaobao. If he had obediently led the envoys and swaggered to inform the imperial court, Mo Suiyun might have thought that there might be some conspiracy. The imperial bodyguard shook his head and said, Prince Ding only brought 4 people and directly entered through the city gates. He didn't change his appearance or disguise himself. Even his attire was his usual flamboyant and luxurious ink-colored brocade robe. He was also carrying a 6-year-old child. Mo Suiyun put down his pen and thought for a moment before saying, Go invite Princess Lin and over. Yes, this official will take his leave. Not long after, a stunning beauty wearing a pink robe walked in. She was only 14 or 15 years old, but her every movement already had an elegant and moving grace. The young girl bowed to Mo Suiyun and said, Lin and greets imperial brother. Princess Lin and wasn't the biological daughter of the late Emperor Mo Jingqi. Instead, she was one of the princesses of the imperial family that Mo Suiyun had brought into the palace to raise in the name of the Empress Dowager after he took power. Mo Suiyun was very clear that Southern Chu's current situation required marriage alliances from many sides. Furthermore, he was still young and didn't have any suitable sisters. Therefore, when he first took power, he brought the daughters of Prince Ding into the palace and conferred upon them the title of princess. Anyone with a discerning eye knew that the so-called princesses were all prepared for political marriages. Among them, Princess Lin was the most intelligent. At the same time, her appearance was also one of the most beautiful. Mo Suiyun naturally had high hopes for her. Not to mention anything else, just looking at Prince Ding's attitude towards Princess Ding, Mo Xiuyao's attitude towards Princess Ding, the various countries still secretly used the beauty trap as a magic weapon to win over the new Prince Ding. They had been working tirelessly. Mo Xiuyao could be said to be wholeheartedly devoted to Princess Ding. He wouldn't give her the moon if she wanted the stars. He didn't love the country, only the beauty. She didn't expect Mo Xiaobao to be like his father. As long as he had half of his father's infatuation, it would be enough, right? Imperial brother, do you have any instructions for Lin? Princess Lin asked with a smile. Unlike other princesses who knew that they were going to be used for political marriages and were depressed, Princess Lind and had always been cheerful and generous. Because she understood that since fate couldn't be changed, then she had to fight for the best result for herself. Mo Suiyun looked at her and said with a smile, "Imperial sister, do you still remember what I told you before?" Princess Lind was stunned and suddenly reacted. Her pretty face suddenly turned red with anger. "Ah? What Imperial brother said is..." Mo Suiyun nodded and said, "Yes, Mo Yuchen has already arrived in Nanjing." Princess Lin tried to suppress her heartbeat and bowed her head. Lin, I'm afraid Prince Ding won't take a fancy to me." Mo Suiyun smiled faintly and said, "Imperial sister, you worry too much. Now even in the whole world, there are only a few women who can be as good as Imperial sister in both literature and martial arts." These words were true. Princess Lind was not only proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy and painting since she was a child, but in recent years she also practiced martial arts. Although she couldn't become a master, she also had a little success. Compared with the ordinary Jiangnan girls, she had a little more heroic spirit. Mo Suiyun stood up and said with a smile, "Anyway, I have nothing to do now. Imperial sister, why don't you go out with me?" Princess Lind knew that Mo Suiyun wanted to see Prince Ding Mo Yuchen and couldn't help blushing. Most of the girls at their age grew up listening to the legend of Prince Ding and Princess Consort. No one didn't envy Princess Ding's luck and the feelings between the two. For Mo Yuchen, the beloved son of Prince Ding and Princess Consort, they naturally had a little more expectations. Imperial sister obeys. "Please wait a moment, Imperial brother, let Imperial sister change clothes and come over." Mo Suiyun smiled faintly and said, "Go." Watching Princess Lind turn around and walk away quickly, Mo Suiyun's handsome face showed a bit of deep thought. Mo Yuchen had been scheming since he was a child. Mo Suiyun didn't have much hope that the honey trap would work. But it didn't matter if it didn't work out. He could just treat it as an ordinary marriage. It was just that Mo Suiyun didn't know that when he prepared a honey trap to entertain Mo Xiaobao was also deliberately trying to steal his wife. Chapter 1147. The Floral Moon Brothel was the most famous brothel in Nanjing City because there was a beautiful lady called Shiren who was known as Jiangnan's #1 courtesan. Ever since the Dechu state moved south to Jiangnan, there were many people who led a befuddled life. Even in these few years, the entire Jiangnan didn't become serious because of Mo Suiyun's ambition to make the country rich and powerful. Instead, there were endless sounds of debauchery. Every day, countless princes, young masters, talents would sleep in the brothel, unable to wake up. This also caused Shiren's reputation to spread even further. On this day, a few strange guests came to the Floral Moon Brothel. The brothel usually didn't open for business during the day, but 3 guests came early in the morning. 2 handsome young men. One was dressed in black and looked extremely handsome with a smile on his face. The other was dressed in dark green with a tall figure and a cold expression. The most important thing was that the young man in white was carrying a 5 to 6-year-old child in white brocade clothes. The moment the 3 of them entered, they wanted the #1 courtesan in the Floral Moon Brothel, Shiren, to sing. The brothel keeper, who was unhappy at first, was overjoyed when she saw the banknotes that the other party casually gave out. Opening a brothel was to earn money. As long as there was money to be earned, who cared if it was open during the day or at night? Thus, the 2 young men and the child were welcomed by the brothel keeper into the best room on the 2nd floor of the Floral Moon Brothel. The cold sound of the zither rang out in the room. There were good wine and delicious food, beautiful maids looking around and enchanting dancers dancing. Mo Xiaobao was half lying on a recliner, drinking wine while squinting his eyes to watch the singing and dancing in front of him. Not far away there was a beautiful woman with a veil sitting and playing the zither. Mo Yufeng was placed on a chair by him, lying on top of him as he curiously watched the singing and dancing in front of him. Qin Lai sat on a chair on the other side, eating the freshest fruits from Jiangnan while saying casually, "Is the brothel in Jiangnan more fun than the one in Glass City?" Glass City was the most prosperous city in the Central Plains. What kind of brothel didn't it have? There were even many blonde courtesans, but Mo Xiaobao didn't seem to like them that much. If it was for the sake of striking beauty, then that was even more wrong. What kind of beauty hadn't Glass City seen before? At least half of the top 10 beauties in the world were in Glass City. Mo Xiaobao lazily looked at him and said, "Alai, you don't understand. In Glass City, There are always some misgivings when playing. We can't go overboard in our own territory. Qin Lai nodded in understanding. Glass City's citizens mostly watched Mo Xiaobao and Ting Shui grow up. Little Prince Mo felt that he couldn't let loose in his own territory. As the saying goes, even rabbits don't eat the grass near their burrows. Mo Xiaobao nodded with satisfaction and said with a smile, "That's right. Besides, since I've come to Jiangnan, it would be a pity if I didn't take a look at the #1 courtesan in Jiangnan." "Now that you've seen it, what do you think?" Qin Lai asked. Mo Xiaobao sighed and said, "The little emperor's taste is very ordinary." The #1 courtesan in Jiangnan in front of him, although she didn't pull down her veil, Mo Xiaobao claimed that he had seen countless people. Just by looking he could tell how stunning this girl's appearance was. And that zither skill that was said to be the best in Jiangnan was very ordinary. "Do you think that this young master didn't learn the zither and couldn't hear the dissatisfaction in your zither?" "What did you say? What does this have to do with the little emperor?" Qin Lai almost jumped out of his chair. Mo Xiaobao looked at him innocently. Didn't I say it? Shiren is Mo Suiyun's confidant." Qin Lai almost wanted to vomit blood. In the morning he ordered someone to seduce someone else's fiancée, and now he was seducing his confidant. Did he really think that Mo Suiyun the little emperor didn't have a temper? A strong dragon couldn't suppress a snake in its old haunts. If Mo Suiyun was really angered, be careful that he secretly killed you. "Alai, don't be nervous." Mo Xiaobao comforted Qin Lai with a smile. Qin Lai glanced at Shiren who was playing the zither with her head lowered and sneered, "I'm not nervous. The person that Mo Suiyun wants to kill when he gets angry is definitely not me." Mo Xiaobao held his chin and said lazily, "Alai, you're thinking too much. Don't think that everyone is as violent as you. I just came to visit Miss Shiren. Would Mo Suiyun kill me? Or do you think that Mo Suiyun is a love saint who wants a beauty but not his country?" Qin Lai was speechless. According to their understanding of the past few years, the words Mo Suiyun and love saint were as unattainable as Mo Xiaobao being a good person. "Two young masters, Shiren will take her leave." After the song ended, Miss Shiren, who was still wearing a pale dress, stood up and bowed, saying lightly. Shiren had already been the #1 courtesan in Jiangnan for many years. Among them she had made friends with countless princes, nobles and refined scholars. Not one of these people didn't flatter her and were courteous and attentive. But these two youths had already run over to listen to her play the zither. That was fine, but in fact they didn't listen at all. It was just that her zither music was talking by itself. This kind of contempt and neglect was something that Chu Feng had never experienced before. He was already somewhat unwilling to accept it, but now his expression became even colder. "Take your leave?" Mo Xiaobao sat up and looked at Shiren with a smile. "This young master is waiting for a friend. It's very boring since he hasn't come yet. Miss Shiren, please play a few more songs." Shiren was angry and was about to refuse coldly. But when her gaze met the eyes of the youth in front of her, she suddenly lost her words. That pair of black eyes clearly carried a joyful smile, but for some reason Shiren felt a chill in her heart. She wanted to refuse, but she couldn't say it out loud. Mo Xiaobao looked at Shiren indifferently and said, "Miss Shiren, please sit properly. Miss should know the person who is coming." Thus, the #1 courtesan in Jiangnan, who was usually untainted, could only sit down obediently. After another hour or so, the sound of steady footsteps came from outside the door. Mo Xiaobao raised his hand and the music in the hall immediately stopped. Looking at the door, it was indeed Mo Suiyun in casual clothes standing at the door. But beside Mo Suiyun, there was a very beautiful girl in blue clothes. The girl looked at Mo Xiaobao, who was half lying on the couch and playing with his younger brother in the hall, and was stunned. Her expression was a bit strange. "Brother Suiyun, why don't you come in?" Mo Xiaobao said with a smile. Mo Suiyun stepped into the hall. His gaze paused on the assailant for a moment before he looked at Mo Xiaobao and said indifferently, "Prince Ding is really in a good mood." Mo Xiaobao smiled wholeheartedly and said, "How so?" "I just came to Jiangnan and didn't know where to have fun. I only heard that Miss Shiren's zither skills were praised by Brother Suiyun, so I came to have a look. I hope Brother Suiyun won't blame me." No, Prince Ding is too serious," Mo Suiyun said with gritted teeth. Mo Xiaobao was very indifferent. "I knew that Brother Suiyun wouldn't be so petty." "Alai, see, I didn't say anything wrong, right?" Qin Lai looked at Mo Xiaobao speechlessly, and walked over to take Mo Yufeng out of Mo Xiaobao's arms. He didn't want to accidentally hurt him. Chapter 1148. Didn't you see the look in Mo Suiyun's eyes that wanted to strangle you to death? Young master. Seeing Mo Suiyun, Shiren immediately got up to greet him, looking at him with some grievance. There was also a red circle around her charming eyes. But Mo Suiyun didn't support her and comfort her as she expected. He only glanced at her indifferently and sat down opposite Mo Xiaobao. He said indifferently, "Prince Ding is a guest. As long as Prince Ding enjoys himself, it's fine. Shiren didn't neglect Prince Ding, right?" Hearing this, Shiren's face turned pale. She bit her lips and didn't dare to speak. Mo Xiaobao didn't seem to see the fear in her eyes. He said with a smile, "A courtesan is inevitably a bit arrogant. Just like our courtesan in Glass City, what's her name again? Every time I went there she would throw a tantrum. Miss Shiren is already very good." Mo Suiyun glanced at Shiren and said, "You can go back. You don't have to stay in Floral Moon Brothel anymore." "Yes, young master." Shiren's voice trembled as she said in a low voice. Although she was a courtesan in Floral Moon Brothel, her other identity was a spy that Mo Suiyun had planted in Floral Moon Brothel. Now that the officials in Southern Chu liked to sleep with courtesans, there was naturally a lot of information that could be gathered in brothels. Therefore Shiren was also valued by Mo Suiyun. But she had been a spy for a few years and didn't expect that the two youths who came early to listen to the zither were the new Prince Ding and Mo Yuchen. Instead she offended them. But even if she didn't offend Mo Yuchen, she wouldn't stay in Floral Moon Brothel for long, right? Mo Suiyun had never set foot in brothels, but Prince Ding knew that their relationship wasn't shallow. He had already known her true identity and came to find her. After sending Shiren out, Mo Suiyun looked at Mo Xiaobao and said, "Prince Ding, we finished listening to the song. Why don't we change places to talk?" Even if Mo Suiyun's skin was thick after all these years, he was still embarrassed to talk about marriage with Mo Xiaobao in this kind of place. That feeling, even if the marriage was successful, it didn't feel like he was marrying a princess. Instead it felt like he was marrying a prostitute. Mo Xiaobao, on the other hand, was not so particular. Looking at the rather tasteful hall, he said, "Why go through so much trouble? Although the ladies in Floral Moon Brothel look ordinary, their desserts are not bad. Brother Suiyun, don't be so accommodating. Speaking of which, Brother Suiyun really has good luck with women. Just now the number one courtesan left. I think that this young lady is no worse than that young lady Shiren." Princess Lin Nin, who was following beside Mo Suiyun, turned pale and glared at Mo Xiaobao with some resentment. Mo Suiyun also knew Mo Xiaobao's character. He never had any morals when speaking to outsiders. He could only say calmly, "This is my imperial sister, Princess Lin Nin. Lin, and this is Prince Ding." Princess Lin Nin stepped forward and bowed. "Lin Nin greets Prince Ding." Mo Xiaobao tilted his head and glanced at Princess Lin Nin. He smiled and said, "I was impolite. Princess, please don't blame me." Princess Lin Nin blushed and said softly, "In Prince Ding's eyes." Mo Suiyun looked at Mo Xiaobao with a smile and said, "Lin An's talent and appearance can be considered one of the best in the world. Moreover, she has admired Prince Ding's concubine since she was young and diligently practiced martial arts. She can be said to be well versed in both the pen and the sword." "Imperial brother," Princess Lin Nin said coquettishly. Mo Suiyun smiled leisurely and looked at Mo Xiaobao with raised eyebrows. Mo Xiaobao blinked his eyes and looked at Princess Lin Nin with a smile. "Princess has really worked hard. But why are you learning from my mother? My imperial father doesn't plan to take in a secondary concubine in this lifetime." Princess Lin Nin, who was still smiling, turned pale and was on the verge of collapsing. Although they had only met for less than a quarter of an hour, Princess Lin Nin had already experienced the prowess of this extraordinarily handsome young man. Mo Xiaobao Prince was extraordinarily handsome and had a naturally smiling and pure and innocent face. Who knew how many people who claimed to be smart had been deceived by him? When they first met, even if Princess Lin Nin was already prepared, she still couldn't help but be moved. It was a pity that this charming and gentle thought didn't have time to ferment before it was struck by Mo Xiaobao and disappeared without a trace. If Mo Xiaobao wanted to pretend to be innocent, even if he killed someone in front of you, you would still think that he was innocent. But if he wanted to provoke others, no matter how sweet his smile was, it would make people want to give him a punch in the face. Not only Princess Lind and even Emo Sueyun's face changed. Emo Sueyun's face sank slightly and said indifferently, "Prince Ding must be joking. The world knows that the former Prince Ding's uncle is sincere to the princess. How can Lin and have such an overconfident idea?" Emo Xiaobao tilted his head and fed his younger brother a snack. He asked with a smile, "It's good that you don't. To be honest, I also don't want to have another little miss. Princess, I'm sorry, I misunderstood." Princess Lin An's face turned green and white. After a while she finally recovered and forced a smile. "Prince is too polite, it's just a misunderstanding." Looking at Princess Lin An's appearance, Emo Sueyun sighed and waved his hand at Princess Lind and indicating for her to withdraw. Princess Lind and also didn't want to face this troublesome Prince Ding here. She bowed and turned to leave. Looking at Princess Lin An's leaving figure, Emo Xiaobao sneered and winked proudly at Qin Lai, not caring that there was another party present. Emo Sueyun stared at Emo Xiaobao and said in a deep voice, "Lin An is a girl." Prince Ding's words just now were a bit too much. Emo Xiaobao was at a loss. "I was too modest." "You think that by pretending to misunderstand, others can't see that you did it on purpose?" Emo Sueyun said in a deep voice, "Prince Ding, do you still remember the matter that I proposed a few days ago?" Emo Xiaobao sat up and restrained some of his mischievous expression. "Political marriage?" Emo Sueyun nodded. Emo Xiaobao touched his chin and asked, "Princess Lin An?" "Lin An is naturally the best candidate. If Prince Ding is not satisfied, I still have a few other royal sisters." Emo Xiaobao waved his hand and said, "I'm not dissatisfied, but I am still young and have no plans to get married for the time being. If Princess Lin An can wait, then it's fine. Prince Ding is already 16 years old. It's time for him to get married," Emo Sueyun said. Emo Xiaobao waved his hand and said, "I plan to be like royal father and get married at 25 years old. There were still 9 years before 25 years old. Not to mention that Princess Lind and would become an old lady by then." If Emo Xiaobao kept his promise, it didn't matter if he gave up a princess. But who knew what would happen in these 9 years? "I heard that Glass City is preparing to hold a consort selection banquet?" Emo Xiaobao chuckled and said, "That's right. Brother Swain, are you interested?" Emo Sueyun said in a deep voice, "What if Lin An can stand out from the consort selection banquet?" Emo Xiaobao said sincerely, "Then I will seriously choose a good husband for Princess." Emo Xiaobao touched his nose and said with a smile, "Brother Swain, Glass City is planning to hold a beautiful banquet. What's the difference? I can arrange a marriage for them after selecting them, lest they keep thinking about I," Emo Xiaobao said as a matter of fact. Chapter 1149. At this point, if Emo Sueyun still couldn't understand Emo Xiaobao's meaning, then he should abdicate immediately. Because he didn't have much hope for the beauty trap to work, Mo Sueyun wasn't too angry even though he was a little unhappy. Then he calmed down and nodded indifferently. "I see, I really envy Prince Ding's carefree nature." These words were absolutely sincere. In this world there were very few people who could be unrestrained. Even though they were the rulers of their respective countries, their actions were often restricted by the situation and strength of their respective countries. Those who could do whatever they wanted were only incapable rulers. But Emo Xiaobao was different. He had the natural advantages left behind by Emo Xiuyao. Although he was still young and might not be able to truly convince the masses, he had a smart mind that most people in the world couldn't compare to and the full support of the Su family. So he could be willful and reckless. Facing Emo Sueyun's jealous praise, Emo Xiaobao only touched his nose and smiled. "I also envy Brother Sueyun for finding a satisfactory empress so quickly. I wish Brother Sueyun and Miss Qian to grow old together and never leave each other." Emo Sueyun was silent. He didn't know why Emo Xiaobao's congratulations sounded more like a curse in his ears. Emo Sueyun quickly left with Princess Lin An. As an emperor and an emperor who was about to get married, he naturally wasn't as lucky as Emo Xiaobao to wander around. Qin Lai hugged Emo Yufeng and sat down at the side. He looked at Emo Xiaobao with a cold expression and said, "So, you came to Floral Moon Brothel early in the morning just to get rid of a spy that Emo Sueyun placed here, and at the same time to mock him?" Emo Xiaobao lay on the chair and said lazily, "How can I be so bored? I really came here to drink tea. Hua Shiren, Princess Lind and Mo Suiyun are all just along the way. I'd be a fool to believe you. Mo Suiyun wants to marry Princess Lind and to you? Qin Lai asked curiously. In fact, including Ling Junhan and Su Zhiwei, they had always felt that those who constantly tried to send beautiful women to Mo Xiaobao by various means were all crazy. No matter how beautiful a woman was, she would only be tortured to death by Mo Xiaobao. Those beautiful spies that were painstakingly cultivated by various countries might be of some use if they were used elsewhere, but in front of Mo Xiaobao, other than being killed by him using all kinds of methods, they were completely useless. Brother Suiyun is also concerned about Ai's marriage. However, I am very sorry that I cannot accept his kindness. Qin Lai was obviously very used to Ai's way of speaking. He asked, then what do you plan to do? Mo Xiaobao tilted his head and thought for a moment. Since Brother Yun is so close to I should also be concerned about him, right? He definitely doesn't want you to care about her. You plan on giving him a beauty? Qin Lai asked. Mo Xiaobao nodded happily. I have already chosen a candidate. Prince Ding sure is efficient. Who did you choose? Qin Lai asked curiously. Princess Linen? Mo Xiaobao, can you be any more perverted? On one hand you are trying to steal someone's wife and on the other hand, you are scheming against someone's cousin. Mo Suiyun, how much debt did you owe Mo Xiaobao in your previous life? In the next few days Mo Xiaobao was unusually quiet. Every day he just took his younger brother to stroll around Nanjing City. Even the guards who had been nervously watching them gradually relaxed their vigilance. In the inn Mo Xiaobao leisurely fed his younger brother snacks. Su Zhiwei went out to visit the famous scholars in Jiangnan and had yet to return. Qin Lai was still acting as the guard as usual. The only thing that was not so good was Ling Junhan's face that was getting uglier by the day. Mo Xiaobao, I can't take it anymore. On this day, Ling Junhan finally couldn't help but rush into Mo Xiaobao's room. She grabbed the collar of a certain someone who was reading leisurely and shook him. What's wrong? Mo Xiaobao elegantly raised his hand and slapped away Ling Junhan's pale claws. Young Master Ling's somewhat tender and handsome little face was pale. He looked at Mo Xiaobao and said with some grievance, that Miss Qian wants me to elope with her. Puchi. Qin Lai, who was sitting on the side, directly spat out a mouthful of tea. He coughed earth-shatteringly and pointed at Ling Junhan, unable to speak. Ling Junhan's fair and tender appearance, compared to Mo Suiyun, didn't have the temperament to attract girls at all? Could it be that Miss Qian's maternal love was really overflowing? She actually wanted to elope with someone in just a few days. Mo Xiaobao didn't seem to be surprised. He said with a smile, it seems that the future Empress of Southern Chu isn't very faithful. Mo Suiyun's taste really needs to be improved. Ling Junhan couldn't help but stomp her feet. What should I do? As she spoke, she stretched out her hands to Mo Xiaobao with an expression that said, if you dare to say that you don't know, I'll strangle you to death. Mo Xiaobao tilted his head and thought for a while. Go and tell her that you can't elope with her. Why? Ling Junhan asked. He always thought that Mo Xiaobao wanted Mo Suiyun to lose face at the wedding because there was no bride. Mo Xiaobao looked at him in surprise. Do you really want to marry her? So it's not impossible. I don't want to. Ling Junhan immediately shouted. He didn't want to marry any woman other than Xen. Then that's it. Mo Xiaobao said with satisfaction. Go and tell her that all the land under the heavens belongs to the king. If you run away with her, it will implicate the Chen family in your family. Just say that you two are not fated to be together and can't meet in this life. Originally, Ling Junhan thought that Mo Xiaobao's idea was wicked and vulgar. But when she heard that they couldn't meet in this life, her eyes immediately lit up. She nodded seriously and said, I know, I will act well. It was really great that they couldn't meet in this life. He didn't want to see that foolish and gullible Miss Chen again. Looking at Ling Junhan's excited expression, Mo Xiaobao secretly smiled. What a gullible fool. Do you think that I told you to hook up with Miss Chen for fun? How can we meet forever? Therefore, student Mo Xiaobao walked further and further on the path of being sinister, vicious, and shameless. Student Mo Xiaobao, have you really not heard of the saying, good will be rewarded with good, evil will be punished with evil? Prince Xiling Genom of Gojoseon is here. Outside the door, the shadow guard respectfully reported, Xiling Genom of Gojoseon? Mo Xiaobao blinked. Qin Lai said lightly, Shilling Genom of Gojoseon Lei Tingfeng 40 years old. Shilling Regent and Prince Yu have a feud with him for killing his father. You couldn't have forgotten, right? Emo Xiaobao pretended to be frightened. How could I have a feud with Shilling Genom of Gojoseon? Qin Lai said indifferently, 5 years ago the previous Prince Ding, who is your father, killed Lei Tingfeng's father. As the saying goes, the son must repay the father's debt. Emo Xiaobao was speechless. He definitely wouldn't tell Qin Lai that he really forgot about this matter. What feud with killing one's father? It seemed very annoying. Couldn't everyone coexist peacefully? Chapter 1150. Emo Xiaobao, with your character, not to mention that you killed his father, even if you saved his life he would still want to kill you in the end. Prince Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill has come to visit. The guard outside the door waited for a while, but did not hear Emo Xiaobao's answer, so he had to report again. Emo Xiaobao sighed helplessly and said, Invite Genom of Gojoseon in. Lei Tingfeng walked into the room and saw a young man lazily lying on the soft couch. He was dressed in black brocade clothes and had a face as handsome as jade. On the young man's body was a 5 or 6-year-old baby dressed in white brocade. With just a glance, Lei Tingfeng understood that this must be the real ruler of the Prince Ding mansion, Emo Xiuyao and Yi Li's second son, Emo Yufeng, who was only 6 years old. For Emo Xiuyao to suddenly give up the position of Prince Ding and leave with his wife, there were definitely many people in the world who were shocked. Lei Tingfeng was obviously among these people who were shocked. After the shock, there was a bit of indescribable admiration and helplessness and despair, as if they would never be able to defeat him. Emo Xiuyao, that man used to be high and arrogant and also fell like dust. However, he rose up at an astonishing speed and shocked the world. Then, when he was at the peak of his fame, he unexpectedly retired once again. This kind of casual and free coming and going like the wind showed the incompetence and inferiority of these people who struggled in the secular world. Jinnan Palace and the Prince Ding Mansion had a father's death feud. Lei Tingfeng once thought of working hard and enduring hardships so that one day he could avenge his father and revive West Hill. But at this time, looking at the lazy and seemingly handsome young man in front of him, Lei Tingfeng only felt a burst of absurdity and ridicule. He was a man in his 40s, yet he wanted to seek revenge from a 15-year-old boy for the death of his father. Not only was it ridiculous, but Lei Tingfeng also felt powerless. It was as if everything that he had painstakingly done over the past few years was a useless joke. Emo Xiaobao stared at Lei Tingfeng for a while, then rolled his eyes and sat up. He smiled and said, Greetings, Mr. Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill. Lei Tingfeng was shocked, but he quickly calmed himself down. He actually lost his mind in front of this young man. He had only wanted to see how capable Emo Xiuyao's successor was. Greetings, Prince Ding. I'm sorry for disturbing you. Emo Xiaobao carried Emo Yufeng and placed him on his lap, smiling. Genom of Gojoseon is too serious, I was just bored. Genom of Gojoseon came to visit I as soon as you arrived in Nanjing. I was very touched. Lei Tingfeng's eyes darkened and he smiled indifferently. I heard that Prince Ding came a few days earlier, but I came to Nanjing for the first time in my life. I was just about to ask Prince Ding where I can walk around. Having supported the overall situation of West Hill alone for a few years, Lei Tingfeng also had more of the majesty and grace of a superior than when Lei Zhenting was still here. Emo Xiaobao clapped his hands happily and smiled. That's great, I was just about to find a few more people to walk around Jiangnan Yuxiu. Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill visited Prince Ding and Emo Yuchen on the first day of his arrival in Nanjing, and locked himself in the room for a full hour. This matter was naturally passed to the ears of Emo Suiyun in the palace. Hearing this news, Emo Suiyun's calm and handsome face also became a little gloomy. With a deep voice, he dismissed the guard who came to report, lowered his eyes and began to silently calculate in his heart. In the inn, the 4 people who had been doing their own things in the past few days rarely gathered together. Su Jirue frowned slightly and said, What did you talk about with Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill? Qin Lai, who was sitting next to him, twitched the corner of his mouth and didn't speak. Emo Yufeng excitedly raised his small hand and said, I know. Brother said that the steamed buns and tofu in Nanjing are very delicious. That uncle said that we can go eat together another day. Brother said that the girls in Flower Moon House are very beautiful. That uncle said that he has a few more beautiful girls in his house and can give them to brother. Brother said, Mo Yufeng's memory was very good. He didn't even have to think about it to spit out more than a dozen brothers. Obviously, Prince Ding and the spy of Genom of Gojoseon of West Hill didn't discuss anything serious from beginning to end. It was all nonsense. Su Jirui rubbed his eyebrows with a headache and said, "Do you want Mo Sueyun to misunderstand? What's the point of doing this?" If outsiders were told that Mo Xiaobao and Lei Tingfeng were discussing these things, no one would believe it. Mo Xiaobao looked at Su Jirui innocently. "Brother Jirui, didn't you say that everything has to be meaningful to do? Even if it's fun we can do it." I found Lei Tingfeng pleasing to the eye, so I chatted a little more. Su Jirui wasn't fooled at all. He sneered and said, "Lei Tingfeng is willing to come personally this time, most likely because he plans to secretly form an alliance with Mo Sueyun. If you do this to trick them, I'm afraid it won't work at all." Mo Sueyun wasn't an idiot like Mo Jingli and Mo Jingqi a few years ago. He was very clear that it was impossible for West Hill and Prince Ding Mansion to form an alliance. Not to mention the blood feud between Lei Tingfeng and Prince Ding Mansion. As long as Prince Ding Mansion had the slightest intention of unifying the world, West Hill would be their first enemy. Because of the terrain, Southern Chu, which was blocked by Yunlon River, would be ranked behind. Now that Prince Ding Mansion was at its peak, if Lei Tingfeng wanted to fight against Prince Ding Mansion, he could only choose to form an alliance with Mo Sueyun. Mo Xiaobao blinked. "I know, I just don't like Mo Sueyun, so I plan to annoy him for a while. Anyway, I'm bored, so it's not a big deal to chat with Lei Tingfeng. Besides, it's Lei Tingfeng who came to us himself, okay?" He couldn't just shut him out. Su Jirui touched his nose, pondered for a moment, and nodded. "I understand. Lei Tingfeng wants to create the illusion that West Hill and Prince Ding Mansion are close, so as to put pressure on Mo Sueyun and raise his own price at the same time. If West Hill was roped in by Prince Ding Mansion, then Southern Chu would be alone. Although they all knew that Prince Ding Mansion couldn't rope in West Hill at all. Mo Xiaobao nodded. "That's right, Lei Tingfeng wants to scheme against Mo Sueyun. I'm very bored, so I did it in passing. If West Hill and Southern Chu successfully form an alliance, their alliance will only be more consolidated, and it won't be good for us," Qin Lai said in a low voice. Mo Xiaobao sighed. "Who asked Dad to offend too many people? Our Prince Ding Mansion doesn't have good relations with people, so West Hill and Southern Chu are destined to form an alliance. Mo Sueyun and Lei Tingfeng aren't idiots." It was precisely because these two people weren't idiots that the difficulty of truly forming an alliance with them was no less than trying to kill them. But it didn't matter in this world. It would only be more interesting if there were challenges, right? This world would be in his hands one day. Mo Xiaobao looked at the sky outside the window, his eyes filled with absolute confidence and ambition. Chapter 1151. In the blink of an eye, it was almost the day of Mo Sueyun's wedding, and the envoys from various countries had almost all arrived. Other than Lei Tingfeng and Mo Xiaobao, no other country's ruler came personally. Ever since the secret talk with Lei Tingfeng, Mo Xiaobao had been unusually quiet. Even when he received the alliance agreement that Lei Tingfeng and Mo Sueyun had secretly signed, he didn't show the slightest change in expression. However, even if Mo Xiaobao obediently didn't cause any trouble, Mo Sueyun's wedding was destined to become a joke because he couldn't think straight and invited this unlucky star to attend. On the first day of the wedding, a frightening piece of news spread to the palace. The future empress of Southern Chu, Mo Sueyun's fiancé, actually eloped with someone on the first day of the wedding. Mo Sueyun, who received this news, broke the weasel hairbrush in his hand on the spot. "Speak, what exactly happened?" Mo Sueyun asked coldly. "The guards sent out were quite capable and returned in less than 4 hours. Reporting to your majesty. We have interrogated the emperor. Qian Residence's maid. It is said that Miss Qian met a young man surnamed Hua, who claimed to be a concubine's son from a wealthy merchant family in Guangling. The two of them were like. Miss Qian's mood has been very bad these few days. This morning, when the maid brought water to the room, she discovered that Miss Qian had disappeared." "Young man surnamed Hua?" Mo Sueyun frowned. "What does he look like? Is he from Guangling?" The guard said bitterly, "Your Majesty, I'm afraid it's a fake name. There are no wealthy merchants in Guangling who believe in Hua." Although Guangling was now the territory of the Prince Ding Mansion, it was too close to Southern Chu, so they were naturally familiar with it. Moreover, the surname Ho was very rare. If there was such a surname, they would naturally know about it. According to Miss Chen's maid, it was a handsome young man dressed in white who looked to be around 13 or 14 years old. He looked very handsome and obedient, making people feel that he was a good person. Fake name. Mo Suiyun frowned. If the bride really eloped with someone, then it was fine. But if someone deliberately abducted the bride at this time, then, no matter what, that woman surnamed Chen deserved to die. Immediately send someone to look for him. If he's alive, I want to see him. If he's dead, I want to see his corpse. Mo Suiyun said sternly. Yes, Your Majesty. The guard's heart trembled and he hurriedly accepted the order and retreated. Regardless of whether this Miss Chen was dead or alive, or why she had escaped from the marriage, he was afraid that even if he found her, she would not be able to survive. Reporting to the Emperor, Prince Ding requests an audience. The eunuch outside the door reported. Mo Suiyun's face darkened. The person he didn't want to see the most right now was Mo Xiaobao. He said impatiently, I won't see him. I have brother Suiyun. She personally came to comfort you. How can you be so cold and heartless? Outside the door, Mo Xiaobao's lazy and mocking voice rang out, making people gnash their teeth in hatred. Without waiting for Mo Suiyun to speak, Mo Xiaobao had already walked in with a face full of smiles. Seeing him like this, Mo Suiyun inexplicably thought of Mo Xiaobao's catchphrase from time to time, seeing that you're not doing well makes me satisfied. This bastard definitely came to see him make a fool of himself. What are you doing here? Mo Suiyun said angrily. Mo Xiaobao blinked innocently and said, I heard that brother Suiyun's empress is missing. Didn't I specially come to comfort brother Suiyun? Hey, I still have a few people I can use in Nanjing City. Do you want them to help you look for her? What if tomorrow's wedding is delayed? No need. Mo Suiyun gritted his teeth. This fellow really came to see him make a fool of himself. He actually thought that he was in a hurry to find that woman for tomorrow's wedding. Could it be that he, Mo Suiyun, had fallen so low that he had to marry a woman who had eloped with someone else? We are acquaintances after all, don't be so polite. Mo Xiaobao said kindly. Thank you for your good intentions. Mo Suiyun gritted his teeth. Mo Xiaobao nodded generously and said with a smile, It's nothing. Mo Suiyun resisted the urge to kick someone out and whip his corpse, and said in a deep voice, I still have important matters to attend to. If Prince Ding has nothing else, please go back first. Mo Xiaobao raised his eyebrows and said, Important matters? Is the whereabouts of the Empress considered important? She's not the Empress. Mo Suiyun roared angrily. Mo Xiaobao was stunned by the roar, blinked his eyes and said with some grievance, If that's the case, then there's nothing important. I will take my leave first. As he said that, he walked towards the door of the imperial study. Stop. Mo Suiyun said angrily, Where is that bitch? Mo Xiaobao touched his chin and said with a smile, About this. Before entering the palace, I seem to have seen her following a man out of the North City gate. She should have gone to the Yunlan River. After passing the Yunlan River, Mo Suiyun was not in charge anymore, and the north was vast, it was very easy to hide someone. Mo Suiyun's face turned black with anger, but he quickly reacted and stared at Mo Xiaobao suspiciously. How do you know her? About this. Mo Xiaobao looked at Mo Suiyun hesitantly and said with some embarrassment, About that, I happen to know the Empress's sweetheart. Mo Yuchen. Go and die for me. Mo Suiyun finally couldn't take it anymore and directly pulled out the sword that was decorated on the wall and slashed towards Mo Xiaobao. Mo Xiaobao blinked his eyes excitedly and leisurely moved to the side to avoid this obviously unskilled sword. But Mo Suiyun didn't want to give up, and chased after Mo Xiaobao with the sword and slashed wildly. Mo Xiaobao didn't fight back and just smiled and moved to avoid Mo Suiyun's attack. The two slashed all the way from the imperial study to the imperial garden. The guards who heard the news originally wanted to protect the emperor, but seeing that the attacker was their emperor, and the person who was being slashed looked extremely leisurely, they felt that it was more troublesome to watch. On the contrary, it was more tiring to watch than to be chopped. Under such a comparison, the guards were too embarrassed to help. Brother Swain, let's talk nicely. Mo Xiaobao said with a smile. Why should I talk to you? In his anger, Mo Swain even forgot the word I that was specially used by the emperor and directly scolded. He must kill Mo Yuchen, this scourge, to get rid of evil for the world. Brother Suiyun, it's meaningless to vent your anger. It's not like I seduced that person. Everyone was horrified and revealed an expression of understanding. When they reacted, they wished they could immediately pierce their own ears. You dare to say that you didn't instruct it? Mo Suiyun sneered. Mo Xiaobao thought for a while and said, I really didn't instruct. He only suggested in the beginning, threatened in the middle and framed in the end. I don't believe it, go and die. Mo Suiyun sneered. Mo Xiaobao helplessly jumped into the air and flew to the opposite roof to sit down, sighing, nowadays, it's really hard to be a good person. Chapter 1152. Mo Suiyun gave him an extremely cold smile. He turned around and glanced at the guards who were watching the show and said sternly, Are you all dead? Shoot him down for me. The guards naturally didn't dare to disobey the order. They hurriedly drew their bows and shot arrows like rain towards a certain person who was sitting on the roof basking in the sun. Looking at the rain of arrows shooting towards him, Mo Xiaobao jumped into the air and drew a black rainbow shadow, instantly escaping far away. Mo Xiaobao's screams could still be heard from far away. Mo Suiyun, you narrow-minded miser. Serves you right that no one wants you. The echo echoed in the air for a while. According to the estimates of the guards with good internal strength, they didn't know if the people of Nanjing City heard Prince Ding's shocking roar, but the people in the palace definitely heard it. Mo Suiyun stared at the eaves of the palace where Mo Xiaobao disappeared, his face alternating between green and purple. Seeing the group of guards trembling in fear. After a long time, Mo Suiyun gritted his teeth and said in a deep voice, Mo Yuchen, I will definitely kill you. After angering Mo Suiyun half to death, Mo Xiaobao suddenly felt that his entire body was more than 100 times better. As expected, if he didn't do something interesting every day, there would be no joy in life. Mo Xiaobao leisurely strolled in the palace. Although this was the palace of Southern Chu and not the back garden of the Prince Ding mansion, most of the guards in the palace already knew this young Prince Ding who could anger people to death. No one dared to come out and stop him. Moreover, with Mo Xiaobao's skills that had been tormented by Mo Xiuyao for more than 10 years, he really didn't have anyone who could stop him. Your Highness Prince Ding. Mo Xiaobao was lying on the edge of a flower bed in the palace garden, staring blankly at a peony that was blooming beautifully in the palace garden. At this time of year, the peony could still bloom so well in a place like Jiangnan. He had to say that it was a pleasant surprise. Moreover, Glass City was located in the northwest. The flowers that could be seen were much less than Jiangnan. Mo Xiaobao only felt that the graceful and luxurious Wei Zi in front of him really suited his taste and style. He was hesitating whether or not he should steal her from the Imperial Garden and move her back to his Prince Ding Mansion's garden in Glass City. Looking back at Princess Lin who was coming from the other side of the garden, Mo Xiaobao turned his head back with no interest and continued to stare at the peony in front of him while silently drooling. What is your Highness Prince Ding looking at? Princess Lin only felt that the blue veins on her forehead were jumping. She was a great beauty, but in the eyes of Mo Yuchen she was not as beautiful as a flower? Mo Yuchen said lightly, looking at the flowers. Jiangnan's environment was still the best. Look at the flowers, they were indeed the king of flowers. It's so gorgeous and graceful, it's really too charming. If she didn't have some sense, Princess Lin simply wanted to grab someone who was lying on the edge of the flower terrace and looking up, shaking him hard and roaring, Are you really okay? Being infatuated with a flower but leaving her, a great beauty, aside. How did this kind of freak who looked at a dead thing like looking at a beauty and a dead thing like looking at a beauty and a dead thing be born? If Prince Ding likes it, Lin Yan asks royal brother to give it to Prince Ding. Princess Lin gritted her teeth, wishing she could destroy the Wei Zi that was trembling slightly in the wind. Can I? Mo Xiaobao hesitated and said, Mo Suiyun is so stingy he will definitely not agree. Princess Lin immediately remembered the shocking call just now, and her beautiful lips couldn't help but twitch. With royal brother's current mood, he definitely only wanted to destroy someone's corpse. Give him such a precious Wei Zi? She was afraid that he didn't want to give a single weed in the Imperial Garden to Prince Ding. Mo Xiaobao casually bit his finger and said, But it doesn't matter. I can take it back first. When Mo Suiyun's anger subsides, I'll tell him. Princess Lin Yan's mouth twitched, coughing lightly and said, Prince Lin Yan has something to ask Prince. Can I ask Prince to give me a little bit of time? The word "a little bit" seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps between her teeth. Mo Xiaobao blinked his eyes and finally nodded. Standing up, he reluctantly looked at the flower in front of him and said, "All right, what does Princess want to say?" The two walked to the pavilion not far away and sat down. Even so, Princess leaned and could still feel that someone's gaze on the garden was much more than on her. Every word and action of little Princo, even his expression, was telling Princess Lind a fact. Prince is not interested in you. What made people even angrier was that he didn't deliberately show it. Instead, he naturally revealed such an intention. At least with Princess Lin An's eyesight, she couldn't see any pretense. Princess Lind secretly gritted her teeth. Although Prince Ding was one of the best in the world, no matter if it was appearance, power or ability, but if she could choose, she definitely didn't want to marry such a man. If the previous generation's Prince Ding was the representative of a good husband, then this person in front of her was simply the synonym of a bastard. The woman who married him would definitely have 8 lifetimes of bad luck. But Princess Lind knew that if she didn't marry him, she could only marry those rich young masters in Nanjing that her imperial brother needed to rope in. Since Dechu state moved to the south, those young masters of the officials became more and more dandy. It was said that in the early years, there were a few outstanding men who occasionally came, but these years, those who had real ability all ran to Li City. And Princess Lind didn't want to marry an ordinary dandy and spend her life in a big house in obscurity. What does Princess Lind want to say? After waiting for a moment, seeing that Princess Lind didn't speak, Mo Xiaobao raised his eyebrows and asked. Princess Lin gritted her teeth and asked in a deep voice, "Lin wants to know, what is wrong with me that Prince is not willing to marry Lin? Not good." Mo Xiaobao raised his eyebrows and sized up Princess Lind a few times. Then he said with a smile, "This is probably because Princess Lin is too old?" Princess Lind gritted her teeth, "I am only 15 years old." Mo Xiaobao nodded and said, "Yes, but I said that you will only marry when you are 25 years old. At that time, you will be 25 years old, won't you be old? Could it be that when I am 25 years old, you will only be 15 or 16 years old?" Princess Lind almost wanted to shout. But she also understood that there was nothing to say. Men and women were so unfair in this aspect. A man stood up at 30 years old, but a woman at 30 years old was already old. Princess Lin couldn't help but envy Princess Ding. Princess Ding met the most suitable person at the most suitable age. Calming down the distracting thoughts in her heart, Princess Lind said, "Prince should know that my imperial brother has the intention of marrying Prince Ding Mansion. Lin can promise that as long as Prince agrees, Lin will never interfere with Prince's matters in the future. No matter what kind of woman Prince wants to marry in the future, Lin will never refuse." Mo Xiaobao propped up his chin and seriously sized up Princess Lin. He shook his head with some disappointment and said, "If this is the case, why should I go to Princess Lin? What's the difference with raising a useless person? What's more, if I have a girl I like in the future, wouldn't she be wronged? So you are sure that you won't like me?" Princess Lind hatefully said in her heart. Although she had no feelings for Prince Ding, who was as bad as a child who hadn't grown up yet, it was still a very embarrassing thing for a woman to be ignored so naturally. Mo Xiaobao looked at Princess Lind with a smile and said, "I know why Princess wants to marry me. In fact, Princess has other better choices." Princess Lin was stunned. Better choices? What better choices could she have? The Empress of Dechu State, how about it? Mo Yuchen, get out of here. Princess Lind was about to speak when Mo Suiyun's voice came from the entrance of the Imperial Garden. Mo Suiyun in a dragon robe rushed over with a sword in his hand. You're tuning in to the Biao's Wuxiao Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.